As autumn arrives and the air turns crisp, many of us start to wonder, what will this winter bring? Will it be mild and wet, or snowy and cold? The answer matters for everything from heating bills to holiday travel. A cold winter can mean higher energy costs, while snow can disrupt roads and schools. Today is September 28, 2025, and we're looking ahead to the winter of 2025 to 2026. Forecasting a whole season is a huge challenge, much more complex than predicting tomorrow's weather. Scientists study massive patterns in the oceans and atmosphere which act like engines driving our weather for months. This winter, meteorologists are watching several key signals, some thousands of miles away, that could shape Europe's weather. We'll break down the major players. Media, satellite image of warm Pacific Ocean regions, animated map showing heat anomalies in the Pacific, unusual Pacific warmth, a developing La Niña, and the polar vortex. Our goal, to give you a clear, simple picture of what experts expect and what it could mean for you. Remember, long-range forecasts are guides, not guarantees. They show the most likely outcome based on current data. As winter approaches, forecasts will be updated, so staying informed is key. By the end, you'll understand the main forces shaping our winter and how to stay prepared. Let's dive into the science of winter forecasting and see what the season may hold. One of the biggest clues for this winter's weather is far out in the North Pacific Ocean, where a huge patch of water is much warmer than usual, a marine heat wave. This extra ocean heat warms the atmosphere and shifts wind patterns high above the Earth. At the same time, near the equator, the Pacific is cooling, a sign that La Niña is developing. La Niña is the opposite of El Niño. It means cooler than average water in the tropical Pacific, which can dramatically affect global weather. When both a warm North Pacific and a cool La Niña occur together, they create a powerful signal for forecasters. The warm water in the north builds high pressure, while La Niña changes tropical winds and storms. Together, they set off a chain reaction in the atmosphere, shaping weather across Europe and North America. Past winters with this combination have led to very specific, impactful weather patterns. The warm Pacific disrupts the jet stream, a fast-flowing river of air that steers weather systems, while La Niña adds its own push. It's like two giant hands shaping the flow of air around the northern hemisphere. Understanding these two ocean signals is the first step in unlocking the winter forecast. They're the foundation for what meteorologists expect in the months ahead. Let's see how these distant patterns reach all the way to Europe. How do these faraway Pacific patterns affect Europe? It all comes down to the jet stream, a high-altitude highway for weather systems. The warm North Pacific creates a mountain of high pressure, forcing the jet stream to bend around it in a wave-like pattern. As the jet stream is pushed north over the Pacific, it dives south over North America, bringing cold air there. By the time it reaches the Atlantic and Europe, it often flows from the southwest. For Europe, southwesterly winds usually mean milder, wetter weather, as air picks up warmth and moisture from the Atlantic. This setup favors above-normal temperatures and more rain than snow for much of Western and Central Europe. The jet stream acts as a barrier, keeping Arctic cold at bay, most of the time, but sometimes, blocking patterns form. High pressure over Scandinavia or Greenland can stop the mild flow and open the door to Arctic air. Even in a generally mild winter, these blocks can trigger sudden, intense cold snaps. The exact position of the jet stream is key. It decides whether Europe stays mild or gets a blast of winter cold. So, while the average trend is mild, surprises are always possible. The jet stream's path is the main player in Europe's winter drama. You've probably heard about the polar vortex, a swirling mass of cold air high above the North Pole. When the polar vortex is strong and stable, it locks frigid air over the Arctic, keeping Europe milder. The jet stream flows straight, bringing mild Atlantic air across the continent. But if the polar vortex weakens or gets disrupted, it can wobble or split, letting Arctic air escape southward. This can bring severe cold and snow to Europe, Asia, and North America. For winter 2025 to 2026, forecasts suggest the polar vortex may be weaker than usual, partly due to La Niña. A weaker vortex raises the risk of major cold air outbreaks, even if the overall trend is mild. Meteorologists are watching the polar vortex closely as it forms and strengthens this autumn. The state of the vortex is one of the most important factors for Europe's winter. Ocean patterns favor a mild winter, but a weak vortex could override that and bring intense cold. This tug-of-war between mild Atlantic air and potential Arctic blasts makes this winter's forecast especially tricky. The The polar vortex is the wild card that could flip the script. Europe's winter hangs in the balance. Putting it all together, the forecast for Europe leans toward a milder than average winter for many. The warm Pacific and La Niña are expected to drive a pattern that brings mild, moist Atlantic air across the continent. That means fewer long cold spells and more rain than snow in lower areas. But average can be misleading. A mild winter overall can still have short, sharp cold snaps. The main catch is the polar vortex. If it weakens, Arctic air could surge into Europe, bringing intense cold for a week or two. These outbreaks are most likely in January or February, especially in northern and eastern Europe. So, while London or Paris may stay mild, cities like Berlin or Helsinki could see significant cold if the vortex breaks down. The message: expect a milder winter, but don't be surprised by sudden severe cold. The battle between Atlantic mildness and Arctic cold will shape the season week by week. Let's compare Europe's forecast with North America's. The same atmospheric setup expected to bring a mild winter to Europe is likely to do the opposite for much of North America. The jet stream's big wave caused by the warm Pacific dives south over Canada and the US, opening the door for Arctic air. As a result, much of Canada and the northern US are bracing for a colder, snowier winter. This pattern often brings heavy snowfall as cold air meets southern moisture. It's a classic seesaw. When North America gets colder, Europe often gets milder. North America sits under the jet stream's trough, cold and stormy, while Europe is under the ridge, mild and stable. This contrast shows how global patterns create huge regional differences, even in a warming world. The winter of 2025 to 2026 is a perfect example of our interconnected climate. What happens in the Pacific can mean a cold winter in Chicago and a mild one in Paris, all at once. How do scientists forecast a whole season months ahead? They use powerful long-range climate models. These models simulate the entire Earth system, oceans, atmosphere, ice, and land, using current conditions as a starting point. They run the model many times with slight variations, creating an ensemble of possible outcomes. If most runs point to the same pattern, like a mild winter for Europe, confidence in the forecast grows. For this winter, major models from Europe, the UK, the US, and Canada all show similar signals: strong Pacific high pressure and a wavy jet stream. When independent models agree, it's a strong sign the forecast is robust. But models aren't perfect. They're better at predicting broad patterns than local details. They can't say if it'll snow in your town on Christmas, but they can show the risk of a colder or milder season. Think of long-range forecasts as risk assessments, not certainties. They help us prepare for the most likely weather ahead. Staying informed means you can plan for whatever winter brings. There's a wild card that could change everything: sudden stratospheric warming, or SSW. An SSW is a rapid warming high above the North Pole that can disrupt the polar vortex, sometimes splitting it apart. When this happens, Arctic cold can spill south into Europe and North America, overriding the usual mild pattern. The risk of SSW is higher this winter due to La Niña and other factors making the vortex unstable. If an SSW occurs, it could bring severe cold, frost, and snow, even to areas that are usually mild. Some of the coldest winters in recent memory, like the Beast from the East, were triggered by SSW events. Forecasters will be watching the stratosphere closely all winter. SSW is the biggest source of uncertainty, and the reason to be ready for surprises. The winter forecast for Europe is complex, a milder trend, but real risk of sudden cold snaps if the polar vortex weakens. Long-range outlooks are updated as new data comes in, so staying informed is crucial. Follow updates from national weather services and trusted broadcasters. They'll alert you if a major change like an SSW is on the way. Simple preparations, checking your heating, winterizing your car, having warm clothes and supplies, can make a big difference. Being ready means you won't be caught off guard if the weather suddenly turns. This winter, the battle between Atlantic mildness and Arctic cold will keep things interesting. Understanding the science helps you prepare for whatever comes. Stay informed, stay prepared, and enjoy the beauty and power of winter safely. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the science of winter forecasting.